This week on Badgerpod NerdCast, with special guest, author John C. Wright. The Badgers discuss the social justice invasion of science fiction and fantasy. Be sure to tune in.
Rated PG-13.
Hello and welcome to Badgerpod NerdCast. Tonight's topic is the social justice invasion of fantasy and sci-fi. With us today is our special guest. Hello there.
You might want to say.
I'm sorry. My mind went blank. I'm sorry.
Okay. You forgot my name.
I'm sorry. No.
Okay,
Rachel,
Everyone
you
does.
go curl into a corner of quivering nerdness, and I will announce the guest. The guest is John C. Wright. He is an author of a fantasy, correct, Mr. Wright?
Both fantasy and science fiction, correct.
And as well as some very interesting essays about that particular, about science fiction and fantasy. I apologize for the any of the sounds in the background. There's currently a truck backing into my what are they called? Things flat concrete. Parkitrave. Yes, good enough. There you go. Thank you. Okay,
and with
John.
We're just all going to forget things tonight.
Yeah, it's going to be one of those nights where we just spend the entire time in the silly place.
I reserve the right to forget my own name as of right now.
I will be in good company then, and thank you very much for your hospitality.
You're welcome.
Your indulgence.
Yeah, we do. With us tonight, in addition to John C. Wright, is Rachel Edwards, who usually hosts until her brain falls out of her brain pan.
Yeah, that's it right there.
Yeah, and she blogs under the at the Tumblr Naughty Nerdess, and Crystal Garcia. Crystal, why don't you introduce some of what you do so people remember?
Sure. Yeah, I'm admin for The Return of Femininity, and I'm writing 100 Days on How to Treat Men Right. I'm also the admin for Loving and Celebrating Men, and I am writing the book Loving and Celebrating Men.
Okay, thanks, Crystal. And we also have Hannah Wallen. Tell us a bit about yourself, Hannah. Plug something you've done.
Well, mostly I write for my blog, Breaking the Glasses. Also for Honey Badger Brigade. Have written some stuff for A Voice for Men, Gender Attic, mensrights.ca, and probably someplace I'm forgetting. But I reserve the right to forget stuff tonight. And also I have a YouTube channel also called Breaking the Glasses.
And Karen, why don't you introduce yourself, even though you need no introduction?
I'm Karen Strawn. I apologize, Mr. Wright, but I am the proprietress of the blog owningyourshit.blogspot.com. My YouTube channel is user Girl Writes What, and I've been talking about this kind of stuff, anti-feminism, men's issues, and branching into anti-social justice warriorism a little bit lately for the last probably 4 years or so. And
my dear, I quite assure you that anyone who uses the word proprietess correctly is very near and dear to my heart, and earns every drop of forgiveness in my small, dark, golem-like heart I can possibly afford.
Oh, well, I have a real fondness for sort of archaic language. I've been sort of almost between Dr. Randomer Cam, a.k.a. Mike, and another YouTuber named Sargon of Akkad. We've been trying to bring back words like termagant and harridan and trollop and also
codswallop.
Excellent. You then will be able to understand me when no one else will, because what you think of archaic language is to me language. I'm not as old as Sargon of Akkad, however, in my linguistics. So
I love old terminology. I love words like blackguard and pish and stuff like that. It's tish and pish even. I really enjoy that kind of thing. So I try and use it and I try and bring it back. So there you go.
And you're also actually in favor of femininity, right?
Yeah, maybe not so much
Oh.
for myself, but for all of the lovely ladies out there who enjoy femininity and embrace it, I'm totally cool with that. I think
It is sad that I'm also married to the most beautiful woman in the world and the most talented, and that I don't approve of polygamy, because otherwise I would offer to marry you. I think it's wonderful that a woman actually likes womanhood. I've been so used to women who hated womanhood with their entire being that you're as rare as a chimera.
Well, I think maybe it's because I have a certain appreciation for women in the same vein that I have an appreciation for men, if you sort of get my meaning. And I very much appreciate sort of very feminine women, and sort of the delicacy of femininity. I have a huge appreciation for that.
Wonderful.
So, although that isn't me by any means, I don't know if.
Oh my God! I'm just.
You and I are clearly cut from the same cloth, because I appreciate masculine men who are direct, honest, trustworthy, loyal, all the qualities men should have, able to kill their enemies and drink their blood, fix a car engine, cook outdoors. Things that I admire at a distance, mind you, because I am not that way at all myself, but I do admire it.
Oh,
Okay.
see, I can totally kill my enemies, fix a car, and drink people's blood, or a $3 vid out of a hollowed out skull, if that's all there is.
Yeah,
So the best thing in life you would say is to drive your enemies before you and hear the lamentation of their women? Is that your...
I don't like to see women cry, but you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, that's true. You got to do, and right now I know that I'm redirecting this to introduce myself so people know who actually is speaking, and hopefully Rachel will be able to uncurl herself from her quivering ball of nerdness and actually take the reins. But
Yes.
My name is Allison Tiemann. I've been the host of Honey Badger Radio for a year now. Not so much lately because Rachel has been stepping into my place. And usually doing very, very well at it, and writing the show notes, doing that kind of stuff. My personal pet project is a science fiction webcomic called Xenospora, which essentially the setting is many, 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 many years in the future, when after the Earth has sent out wave upon wave of colonization, and each of these waves, which differ in technological prowess and social situation when they were sent out, have now come back to interact with each other and find each other. So that's my thing. You can find it at Xenospora.com. And I'm going to hand this over to Rachel to read out the...
Hi.
Are you ready, Rachel? Are you de-quivered?
Yes. I'm holding it together.
All right, take it away.
Sorry, John.
I'm sorry, what was the apology for again?
Oh, because I went blank and forgot your name for a moment.
Yeah, and nobody had any hartshorn.
That's quite all right. It is for that reason I named my first son Orville and my next son Wilbur, so that no one would forget the names Orville and Wilbur Wright. John Wright is a forgettable name.
It kind of is, yeah, like Jack Smith.
Correct.
There you
Okay,
go.
go ahead, Rachel.
All right. The sci-fi fantasy genre has always been an interesting place. It is a place where stories new and old weave tales that not only entertain, but teach us about ourselves as well as the world around us. It is a place of imagination where we can explore perspectives different from our own and view a portion of the universe in the eyes of another. But just out of sight is a battle raging within the writing community. Long gone are the times when authors could be judged on their work alone. Now it's about more than ability. It's about politics and political correctness. The realm of fantasy that once existed without boundaries is quickly shrinking. It is now being claimed by narrow-minded social justice types that feel that there is no room for people of different opinions and viewpoints. But it wasn't always this way. Writers in the not-so-distant past could have their personal beliefs and still be recognized for their achievements in the writing community. It is especially troubling to think that writers like C.S. Lewis or J.R.R. Tolkien might not be welcome among their ranks if they lived in this time. We might not even know the name H.P. Lovecraft or the work of Mark Twain. In truth, it is we who will suffer. As consumers of fiction, we are losing the world's next great writers to this world of ultra-PC thought police, acting as gatekeepers to the human imagination, telling us what we can and cannot read because of who it comes from. The cult of political correctness shows no signs of stopping. It grows in the realm of science fiction and fantasy like a cancerous tumor. perhaps it is not too late to find the cure. There we are.
Okay.
Here.
Yeah. Well, did you? Since you're the guest, I guess you have first jab at adding whatever you want to that, or you can listen to us witter away.
Since I'm the guest, you have to decide when I speak. But
Speak now.
Speak now, or forever hold your.
Very well. I think the article is mild and understated. I think that what's going on is much worse than what it says. The political correctness is a loathsome moral and mental disease which drives out not only a person's humanity but also their capacity to understand drama. All drama is based on a clear perception of the human condition, both its high points and its low points, including things like masculinity and femininity, which we mentioned before. It includes things like good and evil, loss and love, and everything that makes life both worth living and a horrible mystery that we don't understand. Now, political correctness not only pretends to answer all questions, but it also pretends to rule out everything that would make life dramatic. If you've ever heard the song "Imagine" by one of those insects that sings rock and roll, I can't think of his name.
John Lennon.
John Lennon. Thank you very much. And please note that I also forget names. Who are you again? Darling. The problem is with the song "Imagine" is that if you remember the lyrics, which I hope you don't, if you have no nations, nothing worth fighting for, no heaven above us, no hell below us, no good to strive for, no evil to flee, no possessions to care for, no gifts to give anyone else, then you're no longer a human being. You're barely even an ant. Well, political correctness drives us toward this completely inhuman future where there's no drama. If everyone is equal, and I don't mean equal politically, I mean equal as in bland, homogeneous non-beings. If there's not the drama of the mating dance between male and female, the drama of injustices being rectified, the drama of man seeking for the best in him, the best in the world, the drama of a boy who learns better. In order for a little tailor to overcome a giant, the giant has to be taller than the tailor. In order for the fool to learn wisdom, folly has to be different than wisdom. But political correctness is a gray, bland, nauseating dullness which allows for nothing. There's one story the politically correct can tell, and that's the story of the good rebellion of the proletariat, or whoever the oppressed class is, against the evil capitalists, or the evil men, or the evil whites, or whoever the oppressor class is. But there's nothing within the politically correct worldview that gives you a standard of justice by which these things can be judged. And without justice, you have no drama. And so what these guys are trying to do is destroy storytelling. And, by the way, they're also destroying the basis of science fiction. Science fiction is basically about dreaming about the future. Science fiction is about our hopes and our fears projected into the clouds of what has not yet been seen. It's about the tomorrows. Well, if you're a politically correct thinker, you're only worried about today's headlines. The first, let me use an example from myself for two reasons. One, I know it, and two, because I'm an egotist. The first review I ever got on a book. None of you are speaking. Is there anything? Am I still on the air? Okay.
Oh yeah, we're listening.
Sorry,
You may not be used to this, but we're women who listen very carefully.
I should get my wife to come.
I mean, in terms of outside of your family, trust me to put my foot in my mouth.
And I'm sure very scrumptious and delicate foot is too, miss. In any case, unless it's ma'am.
No, it's ma'am, and my foot is enormous, and I'm only 5'2", so I look like an L. And I'll just take myself off the stage now.
But if you see things with the eyes of the spirit, you see things truly. I'm not judging your material foot, obviously. In any case, be that as it may, the first review I ever got was for my book, The Golden Age, which takes place 500,000 years from now. Okay, I proposed in that book that this technology of the future would be so advanced that people could download their brain information, make multiple copies of their personality, get into other bodies, put themselves into computers and other systems that we haven't even imagined yet. And so there was no racism, no misogyny, no basis for any identity politics, because all identity was fluid in that future. Anyone could be anything he wished. And the first review I got said that my main character was Stalin-like, because Stalin was someone who believed that there was a true and a false in the world, and my character also believed that there's true and false in the world. And I got hatred for this first review, because my main character, who was in the body of a man at that time in the story, married my main heroine, who was in the body of a woman at that time. And the reviewer didn't like the fact that there was a love story. And I'm thinking, well, look, if you're going to be offended by love and by virtue and if you're going to be offended by success, then what are you not going to be offended by? And it was at that point that I realized that I would never hold reviewers in anything but scorn from then on. Be that as it may, I'm getting away from my point. My point is that even the most basic elements of storytelling, love stories, stories of revenge, stories of learning better, stories of Little Tale of Killing a Giant, the 3 or 4 basic stories all are ruled out of the politically correct mental universe. They can't tell them, and they can't listen to them.
Well, one of the things, too, is, because there's this huge debate going on about tropes and, how we shouldn't be using them. And one of the really horrible...
Nonsense. Utter nonsense.
It is. One of the really horrible things about banning the use or discouraging the use of tropes is that tropes are a shortcut directly to our amygdala. You don't have to go from, A to B to C to D and so forth. You jump right from A to Z. You know something crucial about that character just through the use of a trope.
Correct.
And it's because we relate to those. And I think that one of the really horrible things about sort of the postmodern, constructionalist, or whatever the hell you want to call it,
I call them post-rational.
Even art as something that eschews beauty and it eschews relatability, sort of elite modern art. And then they wonder why nobody wants to look at it. It's because people want relatability. They want characters archetypes that they can recognize. And yes, they may want to see them put into completely outlandish situations in a fantasy universe or a extremely far future universe. But they want to recognize something of humanity in those characters. And one of the best ways to convey that, if you don't have a ton of page space, is through the use of tropes and archetypes and all of those things. And so it really is a call for blandness. It really is a call for a complete lack of engagement between the reader and the work when you say that, oh, well, you can't use this trope and you can't use that trope and you can't use a love story and you can't use or I would guess that if that love story in that book that got all of that criticism of yours, if it had been a gay love story or a lesbian love story, the criticism would not have been there.
You misunderstand the true irony of what was going on. The entities in my story were completely computerized information. They didn't exist in bodies at all except when and if they wished. So there was no meaning to the words gay or lesbian in that feature.
I know, and yet still, if the two bodies had been male or two bodies had been female, there would not have been that criticism. Even though, like the parasite or whatever, the symbiote in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, it is genderless, and therefore it becomes sort of a genderless part.
But you see my point. If you're politically correct, you're only concerned with the issues of today, right now.
Yes.
Right now, sexual perversion is a great crusade for them, and so they wish to spread it, and they wish to diminish the lure and attractiveness of sexual normalcy, and therefore anything that doesn't play into that they regard as despicable.
Well, I think they're trying to turn normal on its head. They're trying to basically say, they're trying to describe heteronormativity as almost like a crime against humanity, when in reality it's just the way most people are, right? And so when you get into an idea that like these sort of the blank slate theory of gender and how we're all born omnisexual and we're just socialized to like members of the opposite sex, and what?
These people don't know anything about biology then, huh?
Well, honestly, if we're socialized to if all of that is socialization, then nobody would be gay.
Not only that, if all of it was merely socialization, in order to achieve the most delight, charm, and love out of life, we should exaggerate the male and female characteristics to make them as unlike each other as possible, so that merely taking a woman's hand or holding a door for her becomes an act that's filled with thrilling romance. You see what I'm saying? Even if their theory were correct, it's wrong. Even if their theory were correct, we should adopt roles that differentiate us in order to increase the allure and the romance of life. The delight of dancing a waltz is that the man leads and the woman follows. If they both led or they both followed, where's the dance?
Variety is the spice of life, in other words. If everything is the same, then there is nothing new to experience.
There are
These people are also... pardon me for interrupting. Go ahead.
No, there are just no unlike poles to attract each other.
These people are, though they don't know it, members of an ancient 2nd century heresy called Gnosticism. The Gnostics believed that God was the devil and the devil was God. So for them, everything that we call good, everything a sane person calls good, they call evil. And everything a sane person calls evil, they call good. And that's their whole key, their whole trick, is to cloak themselves in this aura of moral superiority, when in fact their only claim to moral superiority is that they stand in favor of things like intemperance, cowardice, injustice, and imprudence. And in the sexual realm, imprudence is unchastity, sexual deviation, and unnatural behaviors.
Ooh, this is a...
Well, it's a highly conservative viewpoint. I think that people are entitled to highly conservative viewpoints. I'm, as somebody who is not 100% straight, I don't particularly find that offensive. So,
no. I was going to say, I think a lot of social justice warrior philosophy, attitude, whatever you want to call it, is really about the thrill of the witch hunt. There is a almost intoxicating sense that you get when you when you have that moral superiority going, and that desire to sort of, or that interest in looking for something to be offended by, taking the offense, and then calling out mob justice against the offender. And it's what social justice warriors generally do. And it's every single time, they get through one incident where that incident is pretty much milked for the witch hunt factor, another incident pops up and they all go for that one. And then, your next incident and they all go for that one. And they'll forget about each incident as the next one comes up as well. You don't see them necessarily pursuing the cases of the previous incidents as vehemently.
If I may, their morality works the same way their economics does. As Margaret Thatcher famously said, socialism works delightfully as long as you have other people's money to spend, but once you run out of other people's money, what do? Well, their morality is based on attacking morality. Their so-called morality is actually an anti-morality. It's actually a stance of saying that to make a moral judgment is a wickedness. To think a logical thought is a hate crime. And
they're spending other people's outrage by inciting.
And when they run out of people to attack, they turn on each other. The fact that Robert Heinlein, of all people, Robert Heinlein, the archangel of the sexual revolution, the archangel of sexual libertarianism, the herald, the guy blowing the trumpet for all the delightful guilt-free orgies we were supposed to be enjoying in the far future year of 2000, for them to turn on him and denounce him as being some sort of arch-conservative, Neolithic Neanderthal is absurd. I say that speaking as an arch-conservative Neolithic Neanderthal.
Well, it really is sort of an oppositional. It's opposing for the sake of opposing,
correct.
Attacking for the sake of attacking, and I come across people who in comments, in threads or whatever, in comment threads where you have social justice warriors who feel like they're in their territory. And some woman will come on and she will express her concern for her sons in the current climate in such a way as to seem vulnerable, right? Like to seem as if she's pleading, right? And I can understand why she would do it, because why wouldn't she do it? She's a woman and she has probably grown up believing that pleading and being vulnerable leads to mercy, right? but not with this crowd. That it's like blood in the water to them. And I think it's not just an intoxicating thing to find a target and call out mob justice. There is something very freeing for the human psyche, especially very insecure people, when they are participating in a mob and they are doing really, really harsh, intense things, right, that they would not otherwise do if they were not part of that mob.
But it's not a real mob. It's a virtual mob.
Well, but the thing is there are examples of real mobs out there. You know, when I don't know if you've seen the footage of the protest at the University of Toronto against a talk given by Warren Farrell, where you had protesters, feminist protesters, getting up in people's faces, just inches from their faces, and screaming obscenities at them. And then when the police finally removed them because they were blocking the doors, they turned around and started assaulting the police and spitting on the police and doing all kinds of things that they would never, ever, ever do. And the sort of the glistening, eye of excitement, the
Glee.
look in her eye as she's there inches away from that man's face, knowing that he's not going to do anything to her. She has free rein to abuse him in this way, right? Because the police aren't going to step in and stop her, right? If he retaliates, the police will step in and stop him because he's the man, right?
Yeah.
And the level of intense excitement, it's almost like a sexual excitement looking at her face,
It's
how
drunk
flushed
on,
she is, and how
it's
bright.
drunkenness on self-righteousness.
Well, and it must
Yep.
be addictive because there are people who make a regular habit of traveling for protesting. And it's not just in one area either. I mean, one of the things I recall hearing on the news, not the peaceful protesters, but the actual rioters that were throwing TVs through people's windows and looting stores and stuff like that in Ferguson, came from out of state and out of the community. And this was, the difference between people who said, well, we think something wrong happened and we want to talk about it, and you had the peaceful protesters. Then you had these people that just went absolutely crazy and literally rioted and had, police conflicts and
So
the
on
police
our
came
end,
out to almost a military level.
on our
And
end,
these are-
we do experience actual real life mobs. So
Yeah.
it is a situation where, these are real life mobs. They're not just online mobs. But I sort of wanted to pull it back into your experience, Mr. Wright. I think Rachel might have a more specific question to ask. Did you want to go ahead, Rachel?
It wasn't going to be a specific question, but what I was going to say is that it seems to me that what this is really about is that these people's they really claim to be inclusive and wanting to include differences and wanting to appreciate differences, but they don't. They only appreciate people that think the exact same way that they do. And want to write the exact same way that they do. And yet, they are shallow. And that's what these stories really amount to
I'm
when
quite
they
serious.
play into that. Yeah.
When they say inclusive, they mean someone who, on the surface only, by skin color only, differs from themselves, but whose core is the same. They can't even imagine that people could honestly have a different soul than theirs, a different core than theirs. That's inconceivable to them. They just react with disbelief. If you find someone who believes, for example, that things have natural ends to which they are directed by their structure, or if they meet someone who's read Greek
Could
and
you
Roman
tell us a bit
philosophy.
about any of these
That
experiences with these kinds of people?
Not really, because one of you ladies was very kind to me and said that I was brave against being bullied, but I have no memory of these guys ever bullying me. What happened is on one day on my blog, a bunch of people rolled in and screamed at me for thought crimes. I assume it had something to do with sexuality. I don't quite remember. No, yes, it was. It was.
Before we go on, could you give us drop a link to your blog and give some your blog address?
My blog address is John's I've completely forgotten it now. Is it SFF,
Oh my goodness,
right?
this is infectious. I believe it's.
Well, I never read my own blog. I mean, I have better things to do than that. It's SFF Right.
Yeah. And what was the specific article that they rolled in on?
Here's what it was. The Sci-Fi Channel, which since changed its name to something unpronounceable, was given an award or a commendation from some sexually perverted group for the glorious act of encouraging members of alternate sexual deviations onto various science fiction shows. Now, as a science fiction writer, while I don't mind people making up new sexes and new sexual orientations and new sexual perversions to their heart's content, I thought it was ominous that the Sci-Fi Channel was truckling to these people who are a minority and not in keeping with the at least the normal majority of what everything in the Western civilization has thought since roughly the dawn of time. So I wrote in my normal illimitable way, wrote a scoffing, sarcastic piece about the other sexual perversions that they would soon glorify. Well, the main point of the pro-homosexual movement now is to identify that as being the same as heterosexuality, as to say that the being able to draw a distinction between those two things is illegitimate. Even a biological distinction is illegitimate. So naturally, they all came pouring in, making a bunch of comments that were completely irrelevant to everything I'd said. And after a few hours of this, I pushed a button and erased them with the same sensation that a man with a noisy mob of drunks in front of his window would close his window. Apparently, this put me on their hate list forever. Now, keep in mind that I'm a rather unemotional fellow, so when I say something like perversion, I mean that word not as an insult, but in its literal sense. When you take something from its normal course and you redirect it toward an end toward which it's not directed. I don't mean that these people are damned and going to hell. In fact, I expect that many of them will get into heaven before me. What I expect, though, is that I can make a distinction between a hammer and a screwdriver, and I can see that a screwdriver is for driving screws and a hammer is for hammering nails. And if I look at my sexual organs, once I get over giggling at how disgusting they are, you can see that slot A is supposed to go into tab B for making a baby and for unitive purpose of drawing male and female together, because otherwise we would have nothing to do with each other. We're about as alien from each other as you can be and still be members of the same species. Now, these to me do not seem like extraordinary or even difficult concepts to grasp, and I don't see that there's anything desperately horrific about saying such things. I used to believe the exact opposite. In fact, I was born and raised as a loyal Robert Heinlein and Ayn Rand fan who believed that everything was legitimate and lawful, no matter how imprudent it was, provided all the parties agreed and were adults. Becoming a father and getting a little experience in my life has snapped me out of that particular delusion. But the particular thing that bothered me was that they wanted to cut off the lower rung of the ladder to other people who were sexually alternate, shall we say, who also would like to be appreciated. And they were trying to say that those guys were evil and bad, but we are good and fair. And I didn't think it was fair to those guys who are just as human as you and me, and probably considerably nicer than I am. So I did not see why one of several sexually deviant behaviors was given the crown of being the paragon of virtue, and the others, which were, as far as I could tell, not really that different, were it was despicable for me to say that they were in any way the same. Now, this led me to believe that the phrase social justice warrior is really, really flattering to them. What these people are is they're post-humans who have evolved into the area where the reason is no longer their guiding light. They're post-rational. So I refer to them as Morlocks myself, out of the kindness of my heart.
One of the interesting things is that it seems that you are not allowed to have an opinion on anything, whether it's homosexuality, transgenderism, anything like that, if you have the incorrect opinion or if you have questions, right? If you have skepticism, right?
Their philosophy does not allow for there to be an honest alternate opinion. They cannot tolerate the concept that there should be a defense attorney to speak for the defense and a prosecution to speak for the prosecution. There's no sides in their universe.
They equate that alternate opinion, even though the alternate opinion is, I believe, many of these people are very good people, and And I don't think that they're going to burn in hell. I think most of them are going to get to heaven before I do. Blah 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 blah. You can say that all you want.
Oh, you mean the social justice warriors? No, I don't. I think they're damnable.
Yeah, no.
I mean, they reject God with their whole heart.
No, not them. The homosexuals.
Oh yeah, no. So
yeah,
I'm not sure.
you can say that all you want.
It's the least of the sins.
Yeah, you can say that all you want. It doesn't matter because social justice warriors will interpret that as you deeming that this subgroup of people that you're a little skeptical about, or you have a slightly different belief about.
My belief is
that basically means that you're saying they don't have a right to exist,
which is complete nonsense.
It is.
When I look at the disordered sexual desire of my fellow human being, and I say he has a disordered sexual desire, then I look at the desires in my heart, which consist of the desire to seize upon all women and club all men to death. And I see the murderous rage and the ungodly lust and the other horrors that crawl like maggots and worms in my heart. And I think they're objecting to me, saying that guy should practice chastity and self-control. I think they don't know. I think they don't know me. They don't know what I'm actually saying. A sin of love is the most praiseworthy sin you can get. It's a disorder of what is basically a noble, the noblest of emotions. But it's still a disorder. Logic doesn't go away just because your emotions are strong. And logically you can't produce a male-female relationship with two males, and you can't produce a child with two males. You can do it with a female in a test tube, and so men are expendable.
I would disagree with that one. But
okay, how about a female and a turkey-based? Oh, never mind.
Yeah, it's well, you know what? I think that a lot of people, a lot of the hosts here would probably disagree with what you have to say, but we do agree that you have the right to say it and speak it and be unbullied for having done so, or I
wasn't. No one ever tried to bully me, so please don't give me compliments I don't deserve.
Or
I think it's more along the lines of you should not have what you're saying turned around and turned into something that it's not, right?
Oh, people should not lie about me, certainly.
Like I said, it really is. If you have the slightest questioning of what they believe about these issues,
but keep in mind,
that's equated with you saying that they don't have a right to exist.
In my particular case, I used to be one of the sexual revolutionaries. I used to be all in favor of anyone doing anything with as many people as possible, as long as it was all agreed upon, as long as there was consent on all sides. And I was talked out of that position. I wasn't emoted out of it. I wasn't hit over the head with a bag of bologna or something. I didn't wake up. I didn't fall out of bed one day and find that my heart had been completely consumed with hatred for a whole class of people. I was just talked step by step by a logical argument into believing that there's such a thing as order to nature, rather than just an arbitrary chaos. So, once you believe that, then I could not escape coming to the conclusions I've come to. And it was very much, believe me, it's very much against my inclination. Did I mention the raging evil in my heart? So I did not want to come to these conclusions.
You have mentioned that a few times.
Really?
Yeah.
I only mentioned it once.
Oh, at least I think you described it as maggots or something.
Yes, maggots.
It was a very colorful description.
Horrible.
But well, I don't really want to get into because that could take the entire an argument between us on this particular issue could take up the rest of the time. But I wanted to ask,
and the rest of Western civilization, because it's
probably
discussed for the last 2,500 years.
And
I could take issue on that as well, but I'm not, for the sake of it's not. I'm not really the new person on this show.
You don't think the nature of man has been being discussed for 2,500 years?
Oh yeah, no, I think the nature of man has been discussed for even longer than that. But what I wanted to ask was you talked about well, there was a few questions that I had. First of all, you talked about in one of your collections of essays about the dark side of transhumanism. I was wondering if you would like to clarify that for our listeners and the other show hosts, and we can ask our questions.
Unfortunately, it's an essay I wrote, and so I'm not sure exactly what I said. Could you remind me? Because keep in mind, I have as bad a memory as anyone I've ever met.
No, you know what? I only know that you wrote the essay at this point in time. I'm in the same situation that
well,
Rachel is in.
there was a movement going when I wrote The Golden Age, which is my first published work. There was a movement going on called Transhumanism, which took some of my ideas and thought that I was talking about what they were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was trying to do was, oh, good grief, and author talking about himself again. Never mind that. What their theory is that within our lifetimes, immortality may well be developed. The ability to transfer all your brain information, soul, spirit, memory, everything, download into a giant mainframe, to increase your intelligence dramatically, and to basically overcome all the limitations of human nature. Hence the name transhumanism. And to me, this looked like my book was slightly more cynical than that. I don't think you'll leave behind the natural desire of a person to vaunt himself at the expense of others, to control things that he should keep his hands off of, I don't think you can overcome lust, gluttony, wrath, greed, and so on and so forth, pride. I don't think those things can be cured by a technological invention. I think the only thing you would get if you had an ability to augment your minds to superhuman levels would be superhuman levels of pride, wrath, lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, and so on and so forth. So I stumbled across a message board of these people, all of whom were quite complimentary of me until they talked to me and then found out what a horrible person I am. And I found out that what they had was basically I don't know how to put this politely, they were idolaters. They were worshiping this statue of themselves that they had erected in their own imagination, and they didn't even have the dignity of real idolaters, like people who sacrifice babies to Moloch, because they didn't even actually have a real statue. They had this concept in their heads that they could become like gods if only they could get rid of the things that made them human. So it looked to me like they were. It looked to me like they were trying to get rid of their humanity as fast as possible. One of them even was so bold as to say that we should make intelligent computers, but not teach the computers right from wrong, because the computers, being smarter than us, would have their own notions of right and wrong, and should simply decide the fate of the human race according to their own unemotional, superior logic. And I thought, has this guy not seen any old horror movies? Don't you know where that leads? The idea of making a computer and not teaching him right from wrong is similar to the idea of having a baby and saying, I'm not going to teach my baby right from wrong. Well, what was the point of all the experience of human history and all the experience of pre-human history leading up to this point that you, as a parent, are supposed to impart to your precious beloved young? The problem with intelligent computers is not that we're too stupid for them and they're going to be great and smart and glorious and nothing bad will ever happen again. The problem with intelligent computers is if we make them rather than bear them, we might not love them as much as they should if they're going to be self-aware. See, because only by loving someone that you're raising can they offer back the obedience they need until such time as they're able to make their own judgments. Children need to obey their parents because children, by the very act of being children, don't know what's going on. That's why we call them children. Well, if you make a computer, no matter how quickly you pour the information in, there's going to be 1 microsecond before it has the information about what life is all about and what the reality around it is like. During that moment, whatever it is, the thing needs instruction. So naturally, this did not go over very well with the transhumanists. They seem to think that love was not something science fiction writers should talk about. I assume that's because love is going to be stopped in the far future year of 2000, and after that, we're all going to dress in unisex jumpsuits and really talk very logically like Mr. Spock. Now, I think I would prevail in that environment, but I don't think they would. I think the computers would eat them first.
Yeah.
One can hope.
It sounds to me like they were trying to, this is something that is funny to me about social justice warriors, because they're always finding one way or another of doing it, but they're trying to find a substitute god.
Yeah, it was
Humans in general always seem to have something. Even if they don't acknowledge a deity, they have to have something that they adhere to.
By definition, they have to have a highest priority. Okay?
Well, and
even if they have no notion of the divine, they have to have something that they put as a higher priority above everything else. Now, all you have
and
to
then
do,
the thing about this, it would act exactly the way most social justice warriors hate to hear God described.
It would turn on them and
something that was completely impartial and didn't have right from wrong would do all of the things they complain about the biblical God doing.
Yeah. One of them said that the worst thing he could imagine would be a supercomputer that was religious. So I deliberately put into my next book the moon in my upcoming Architect of Eons is a Carmelite nun. There's a brief description of how she was baptized by being intersected with water asteroids that had been properly blessed by the Archbishop. When I say the moon, I mean a giant
terrific.
Computer, I mean a giant computer at the core of the moon that's made entirely of logic diamond.
That sounds terrific. That's going to be awesome. But yeah, I see this as
so as not to make the Morlocks worry. The Jupiter brain in that story is however a secular humanist or a secular machinist, I suppose one would say.
Yeah, it would have to be a machinist. It can't be a humanist if it's not human.
Correct.
Unless the computers decided that humans were gods.
I think they could do that as long as they didn't meet me. In which case, they would. Well, no, I take it back because of course the ancient Greeks knew that their gods were flawed. I mean, Zeus was a philanderer.
Well, I mean, think about. There was a time when people thought cats were gods. Cats are the laziest jerks on the planet.
That's why people thought they were gods.
Yeah, they get away with everything, and you serve them willingly, and obviously they must be gods.
I am glad that the humans have figured that out. Now, if someone could only explain it to the cats, then
Yeah,
well,
maybe they would act a little bit better.
But I think that tendency to
but let's not mock the cats too much. Human society should feel grateful for them. If it had not been for them killing the rats and mice where we stored our grain, we would never have gotten an agrarian society. We'd still all be nomads, hunter-gatherers. Without agrarian society, you don't get civilization. Without civilization, you don't get calendars. Without calendars, you don't get writing. Without writing, you don't get science fiction writing, which is the culmination of all good and wonderful things in the world.
Yes.
That is a beautiful, beautiful train of logic.
Thank you.
Except that I don't own a cat.
And you don't particularly like cats.
Yes,
I like cats. I have
had
an
cats.
adorable cat.
I'm not a
cat
cat person.
We call her husband
But,
the cat lord.
Yeah,
No.
they're all my husband's actually, chosen cats.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is awkward. No, go ahead,
Cat
Rachel.
adoption.
Cat adoption, yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Actually,
No, what I was going to say was regarding this whole creation of gods thing. It's really a manifestation of people's desire to appear superior. If they're the ones that come up with the idea, then they get to be the ones that control the idea, so they get to control what is morality, and that allows them to put forth themselves as being the superior moral beings.
Sure, the judge always rules in his own favor in that courtroom.
Yeah.
And
It's
if there is sort of a religious terminology for it, being seen as the expert or the authority on something, I forget what it was. Nick would know, our overlord, patriarchal overlord, but he's not here. But yeah, no, there is a. It's almost like an intoxication to, I think, being widely viewed as the unquestioning authority on anything.
yeah.
Well, the old-fashioned term is vainglory. If you notice,
Right.
all these Morlocks are vainglorious to the ultimate.
Yeah.
They have more vanity over less accomplishment. I mean, how many of them have saved another human life, or even pulled a tooth, or done anything of worthwhile? No, I'm not
They just
kind of
co-opt
used.
other people's successes, like they were
Right.
going to do with your work.
Right.
Yeah. Well, go ahead, Rachel. I mean, you've been stepped on a bit here.
Well,
Yeah.
there was one last thing I wanted to
Okay,
say
right.
before I was done, because like you've referred to having been sort of lambasted verbally or in comments and everything on your blog,
Well,
and you've said you've not been bullied.
No.
One thing I want to clarify because when you talk about bullying on the internet, there's bullying, and then there's what gets called bullying all the time. So the experience you're describing is something that gets referred to as bullying all the time, and one of the points we make on a regular basis is that there are folks that consider themselves tough enough to not think of it that way. And so thank you for providing an example of that.
I'm sorry, you lost me. Say it again, please. I don't understand.
Well, she's saying that there's certain things that people we call bullying, and some people are tough enough that they don't consider it. It's just irrelevant to them.
Well, everything that people came on to say was illogical. So it had zero possibility of changing my mind. So it was not worth paying attention to.
Yeah.
Well, what I'm saying is that there's a differentiation between somebody coming up and clocking you in the face, or picking you up and turning you upside down, sticking your head in the toilet and flushing, or stacking your locker at school when you're a teenager, or whatever, filing false restraining orders against you repeatedly to drive you nuts, whatever, and making nasty comments on your blog.
Battery, abusive process, and tortious interference.
Right, and all those
Did I mention I used to be a lawyer? Did I mention that?
But all of those are bullying. Those are real, genuine bullying. But if somebody tracked you down to every social site you were on and tried to make it so that you could not get away from them, that might qualify as bullying. But we've been told as men's rights activists, been told by social justice warriors that we are bullying when we argue with them.
Well, that's because they're hypocrites and filthy liars, and they have a double standard. Yeah. They're both as thin-skinned as it's possible to be. So hypersensitive as the way an eyeball is sensitive to grit to any insult against themselves or their positions, but they also fight like hellcats, and without ever bothering to throw down a gauntlet or exchange last names or agree on weapons, they come to attack you from ambuscade in the most cowardly way imaginable.
Of course they do, and then they retreat to a place and close off comments.
Yep.
But
this is because they are cowards. This is because they lack the male member.
I wanted to just clarify something, because a lot of people call this also harassment, right? When 3,000 people on the internet leave 3,000 nasty comments, one apiece, on something like Anita Sarkeesian's Twitter feed, right?
Or even 3,000 comments just in disagreement. They don't even have to be nasty. They can politely disagree.
Even if they're the nastiest comments ever, right? Calling her all kinds of names. 3,000 single comments from 3,000 individuals. Does that qualify? Are any of those individuals guilty of harassment?
You're asking me?
Yes.
I define harassment.
Well, I'm asking you as a lawyer, as a former lawyer, right?
As a former lawyer, I would say don't talk to a former lawyer, because I don't know what the statute is.
Okay.
In the common law, that would be a nuisance.
Because
but they're individuals, each posting one comment, which can't by itself be considered harassment.
It can't.
They would be jointly and severally liable if a mob does.
Yeah, but they're not actually a group. They're just they're just people coming in from everywhere on the internet. There's no hive mind happening here.
The really sad thing legally is that the Violence Against the Violence Against Women Act, which I had the misfortune of going through and reading in detail, defines engaging in a course of conduct with intent to harass or intimidate that could be reasonably expected to cause substantial emotional distress as stalking. It doesn't give a time period or say that the conduct has to be repeated or anything.
It's all based on her feelings.
But it says a course of conduct.
It's a really ridiculous.
By that standard, the answer is no, because you don't have all the elements of the crime. You don't have a course of conduct. You have each person doing one thing. It doesn't.
But that's an example of bullying.
But I will say, in terms of the law, the internet produces a unique situation where something like a mob, a flash mob, if you will, can gather instantaneously electronically and disperse just as quickly.
Of course.
Now,
and this is one of the horrible things, and I think that there's no doubt that somebody who's subjected to 3,000 comments by 3,000 individuals, all of them nasty, I'm sure that they feel harassed and they feel put upon and they feel distressed, right?
If they're weak.
Well, okay, you're right.
If they put a lot of stock in what those people
and very
say.
mean. No, excuse me. I should amend that comment. That was rather
Well,
cool.
no, I don't even think it's a matter of weakness. I think it's a matter of being able to consider the source, right?
It depends on how shall I say this? I think a woman has a right to be offended in that situation. I think a man doesn't, because I hold them to different standards. Men are supposed to be more stoical. The opinion of the world should not concern them that much.
I think men are biologically more stoic, actually.
You know a finer brand of men than I do. Please introduce me.
So certain phenotypical differences between men and women, the structure of their tear ducts and tear glands, leads me to believe that women evolved to be criers and men did not. Women evolved, they have chemicals in their tears that when men are exposed to them reduce testosterone and sexual arousal in men, right? Women evolved all kinds of mechanisms for showing distress because it worked for them, right? Men evolved mechanisms to avoid showing distress, right? They're physiologically and hormonally inhibited from crying. And one of the reasons for that would be because crying just didn't work for men. It did not lead to, even if it led to survival, it did not lead to reproductive success for men, right? So, I mean, like there is something to be said for innate differences that are reinforced by the culture between men and women that would lead a woman to be much more likely to be highly distressed by this kind of stuff, the internet flash mob.
What is
I'm
pathetic?
gonna interject here.
Pathetic is that as a man, I could not protect my wife from the harassment she was receiving, and in her case, I thought it was harassment. This woman who is the least, she's not like me. Opposite attracts. She's not mean like I am. She doesn't insult people like I do. She like cares about them like as if they are real to her in a fashion that in my sociopathy is not true for me. And so for this kind-hearted, the kindest woman I've ever met, she will not even swat a fly. And I wish I was kidding about that because there's flies in my house that I wish she would swat. And for her to be called all sorts of, racist and bigot and, I mean, good grief, she's a Jewess. I mean, who's she going to be racist against? Because she said that you should, and the comment that provoked the mob, by the way, was she said that people should be judged by the content of the character rather than the color of the skin.
And it's like, and what's interesting about social justice warriors is they won't admit that these terms, misogynist, racist, bigot, are themselves like the term slut and other shaming terms, and they can be misapplied. And they can be used as abuse and as bullying. So they never recognize that they are themselves bullies.
If I may point the comment,
especially by their own definition.
Yeah, they never.
Yeah, they're trying to silence people.
If I may point the comment back to an earlier point, we were talking earlier about how tropes were used and how the Morlocks wish us not to use tropes, which is about like going to a carpenter and saying don't use the tools in your toolkit when you're talking to a writer. The thing of it is, what they have is analogous to a zero tolerance policy. Instead of saying, use your reason and differentiate between good tropes and lazy tropes, differentiate between bigoted tropes that demean an entire race of man and tropes that are convenient because they're based on the common experience of mankind, they say don't use any at all. And then they turn themselves into Pharisees, into hypocrites, because they immediately use the tropes that are approved of by the social justice warriors. In the same way, though I should object once again to that term, they are the opposite in every way. They're not social, they are not just, and they're certainly not warriors. They're as cowardly as worms.
Well, I think we can use the term ironically.
Yeah, use it correctly, ironically.
Oh, gosh.
But I actually wanted to ask.
But you see where I'm going with this? They use tropes the same way they use guilt terms, the same way they use shaming terms. They are bullies who wish not to be called bullies. They're bigots who wish not to be called bigots. They're racists who wish not to be called racists. Yeah, because for them, evil is good and good is evil. They've merely got their morality switched reversed.
Engaging in a socially acceptable kind of bigotry because it's socially acceptable now to sit there and call someone all of these things because they have the appearance of moral superiority.
Correct.
Oh, well,
But what's the moral superiority based on? They're not actually martyrs. They just wish we would attack them so they could become martyrs.
Like I said, it's the appearance of that, and that's the thing. This whole idea of like checking your privilege, and it's basically saying, get to the back of the bus. You don't get
It's
to
a victim
You
care
don't-
And
yeah.
system.
the first time I heard the term "check your privilege," it was over an internet discussion being said to a woman who had 2 deaf children. Her husband was working part-time, and she was living in a rat-infested hellhole. I believe her skin color happened to be white, but if she was privileged in some fashion, then that word is being used far differently than anyone in an aristocratic society would recognize the term as being used. The word literally means that your class gives you certain legal rights that people of other classes are denied. Because you're an aristocrat, you may carry a sword. If you're a peasant, you may not. Well, the way my young friend was living with her the burdens on her life, to have some stranger accuse her of receiving some special help from someone somewhere. This was coming, by the way, from a black woman who had been living in a culture. I won't speak to her particularly, but in our culture, there are set-asides, there are quotas, there are special privileges granted.
Yes.
affirmative action.
This was a rich black woman talking to a poor white woman.
I wanted to ask about what your experience specifically with ironically termed social justice warriors and how they've affected things like the Nebula Awards and other stuff in the community.
Well, again, twice now you've called me an insider. I'm not really qualified to say because I joined the guild at the earliest time I could, as soon as I had 3 short stories, really. And I thought I was going to be moving among the luminaries of the science fiction field, people like Asimov and Clarke and Heinlein. And if you guys don't know who that is, then you're not science fiction readers.
At least I do. I can't speak for the others, but
to my shock, and I paid them my dues because I thought that they would help stand between me and either predatory practices by unscrupulous editors, or would help with meeting like-minded professionals. I thought it was a professional organization where what we had in common was we were all members of the same profession, and I thought that meant one should act professionally. Now, professionally means you act according to the dictates of your vocation, not according to your personal moods, feelings, political opinions, your favorite color, or whether you prefer pie to cake. And so when Malzberg and another famous author whose name I forget, not because he's not famous, because I can't remember his name, were both fired because they wrote in the guild in our in-house magazine about a lady editor who they thought was rather brave when breaking into the field when at the time it was an all-boys club, or at least perceived that way. That's kind of a myth, by the way. You ask Leigh Brackett about that one.
I know it is.
Thank you, ma'am. And so they got the outrage, the ginned-up, false, bogus, ridiculous outrage was because there was a picture of a busty she-warrior slaying a monster on the front cover of the magazine. One would think that the image of women slaying monsters without any masculine help would be a feminist image, but no, it was held to be anathema. Beg pardon?
It was demeaning and degrading to women. It was presenting them as sexual objects, or as
quite correct.
Calls them fight fuck toys.
Please don't talk that way. If you look at the science fiction covers from the beginning of the genre in America, I won't speak to England. England has a more literate roots for science fiction. The pulp covers have always had gorgeous women on them and always had manly men because people want to read about drama. When you read an ancient epic, you don't read about the face that couldn't launch a single ship because she was so ugly. You read about Helen of Troy, or you read it because she was the most beautiful woman in the world. You read about Penelope, who was smarter than her husband, a really realistic, or you read about Clytemnestra, who axed her husband to death in the past. None of these people are forgettable characters. So, having lived in the science fiction field for the last who knows how long, 100 years? No, it's not that old. But, I guess H.G. Wells. With such portrayals, for them to pick that cover as the one thing that was now intolerable, ridiculous. What about every Frank Frazetta cover ever made? What about everything drawn by every famous artist in our profession, in our guild? And the editrix was also fired at the same time. The Vox Day, Theodore Beale, who surely is one of the most obnoxious men ever to breathe air, was also drummed out of the guild, not because of his obnoxiousness, but just because his political opinions were against what was socially correct. Now, his political opinions are not my own, and I find his political opinions to be socially incorrect also. But if I'm a professional, shouldn't I put aside my personal feelings about what a guy thinks if I'm going to work with him? You see? And so for them to do that, for them to single this guy out and get rid of him, and to single out Malzberg and the other guy whose name I forget, Heinlein or whatever it was outrageous. Now, I must say, John Scalzi has never offended me personally. In fact, he's always been quite polite to me. I have nothing against him personally. But under his leadership, the Guild turned from being a professional organization to be a political organization. And not just a political organization, but an organization devoted to the propaganda of the lowest and most mind-bendingly stupid sort imaginable. And so when the Nebulas made a sweep, I believe it was all women authors, the Morlocks all celebrated as if the sex rather than the merits of the work were what was important. And they rejoiced in the fact that they were no longer going to judge works based on their merit. And at that point, I said to myself, and myself said back to you, always talk to yourself, that's insane. I said to myself, why am I paying dues to this organization? What possible benefit can they give me? So in a fine fettle, I turned in my resignation as loudly and as publicly as I could, not because I thought anyone would recognize my name. I didn't. But because, and this will tell you something about my personality, when I told my dad on the phone a month later, and my dad knows nothing about the science fiction field, nothing about the world, and I said these people had betrayed the charter of the organization, which is supposed to be a professional organization. We were supposed to treat each other like adults, and these guys couldn't do it, so I had to quit. My dad said one word. He said, good. It was for the approval of someone I thought worthy of judging my conduct that I did this. I did it as publicly as I could.
Well,
yeah, that's well. We feel that that's the way to go. What
else can you do?
Yeah, really, it's you just have to say I just okay this far and no further.
Right.
And what I wanted to thank you. We are at the end of the show, and it's been interesting and great talking to you. And so thank you for coming on, Mr. Wright. And do check out his blog. I'm not going to ask you to say it again, but we'll put it in the low bar when we upload the show to our channel.
I've remembered. It's sci-fi-rate.com.
Yeah, great.
SCI.com.
Yeah, we've been sort of having an infection of the memory today, but
and be warned, as you can probably tell, I have a classical education, and I'm a philosopher, and I'm an ex-lawyer, so I'm very argumentative. So only if you want to hear the most obnoxious opinions supported by the most rational arguments possible should you go on my blog. Otherwise,
I feel like being at home.
You know what?
I'd much prefer that you buy my wife's books, which are like nice and written by a nice person who writes about nice things.
Well, I'll have to say that I think we here on Honey Badger Radio and A Voice for Men, we probably set the bar pretty high for being considered obnoxious and horrible people. But
you mean
we're the bad people.
Do you mean the lovely hostesses?
Yes, we're considered pretty horrible people. Well, mainstream media tends to regard us.
They're demons. They should be hanged. I mean, I used to work for. I should have given my CV at the beginning of your show. I used to work for a newspaper, so I recognize it when they're doing propaganda, and they do it all the time.
Oh yeah, we know. But according to them, we're bad people. Of course, some of the nicest people I've ever met, according to the media, are bad people. So there you go. But we do have to end the show because our James has to get going, and so do we probably. So I wanted to thank.
Allow me to thank you in return, and I hope that any of your listeners who were suffering from insomnia are now fast asleep.
Yeah. I
No.
But anyway, so I wanted to thank my hosts as well, and I want to thank all the behind-the-scenes volunteers. And yeah, we didn't end up in the silly place as much as I thought we would, but and Crystal didn't get to say much, but maybe she can do the thing. Crystal, do the thing. Do the thing, Crystal. Crystal.
Quick, Crystal.